actual laws of science and reality, we can't break them. And in that way, we can just trust them so much. This is part of what brings me to physics in the first place, just how reliable it is, and how when you understand it, it's so repeatable. We're never able to break the laws of physics, and neither is anyone else.
Hi, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you're going to hear interviews with innovative creative artists, entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders. You'll have a front row seat as they explore their internal, uncharted waters about what inspires them to grow, create, and innovate. Get their insights and realizations as I tease out answers to questions they've never even pondered before. And are you feeling stuck in your career or unsure of your next move? Your creativity could be the key to unlocking the perfect career path. Take my quick quiz to find out how your creative strengths can help you design a more fulfilling professional future. The link to the quiz is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by my favorite productivity hack, the Brain FM app, this podcast's host, Podbean, as well as my book, Speak From Within, Engage, Inspire, and Motivate Any Audience. And now, let's get to the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Creative Solutions Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'm really excited to bring you this week's guest. Let me tell you about Molly Brown. I want you to get ready to embark on a really amazing journey with Molly. Molly is the visionary mindset engineer. From physicist to intelligence analyst to mechanical engineer, Molly's diverse background has uniquely equipped her to unravel the mysteries of the human mind, and you know that's catnip to me. Join me as Molly's going to share her groundbreaking insights on how we as people, as individuals, are the quantum computers, the ultimate technology. Tune in today for a captivating discussion that's going to revolutionize your approach to life. And I'm very excited to welcome Molly Brown to the show. Thank you so much for being here, Molly. Welcome.
Hi, Isolde. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I am amazed and impressed and just fascinated by the work that you do. And you come from this very technical, scientific background, and you've gone sort of through that and maybe out the other side. We spent a little bit of time talking, and it's just amazing to me that it's groundbreaking. And in some ways, it seems like it's the oldest thing in the universe because some of it goes all the way back. So I was wondering, before we go any further, can you walk me through that journey from physicist to intelligence analyst to mechanical engineer to mindset engineer? What occurred for that transition to happen?
Sure. So it starts with passion, and my passion has been physics. I guess because that's where I like to ask questions, and physicists started giving me really satisfactory answers. So I followed them around and studied from them, and went to college and studied physics in college. And in my younger college, high school age, college age days, also had this, belief that I needed a certain type of career and it needed to look a certain kind of way. And so the engineering came into it that way as a way to use the physics outside of academia and, be out in corporate, which there was a time when I thought that's what I needed to do and wanted to do. And so the engineering came into it just as an application of physics, which of course would be an application. And I was in mechanical engineering and aerospace. And so that's an application of Newtonian physics. And I kept the whole way on my own, staying in the physics and studying the physics, and following my own questions and kind of guiding, because physics or science it's a really big world. So just following my own questions, which took me into, consciousness and life, and which takes you into quantum physics. And that's where I kind of land on the understanding that we are the quantum computers, and not that we can't also make technologies and do quantum computing that way also, but Like this consciousness, this life is performing a function almost inside this GUI user interface of a body, and to start interacting with myself and with the world that way, and gave me tremendous authority to make huge changes in my life. So to really get in the driver's seat, or the command line, however you want to look at it, of my own life. And so that's where I go out and I help other people kind of first from the position of empowerment to uh, take the searching from outside to inside and really empower people that you are, first of all, the most advanced laboratory of consciousness and life ever, and the most advanced on the earth, as we all as humans equally are. So and you're staffed with the most advanced understanding of consciousness and life that there is, and it says you as a living conscious being, and there's no one with a PhD, there's no doctor, there's no one older or more studied that has any more access to what is it to be a life in a consciousness than you do, and to empower people from there, and then help them start asking questions and seeking answers the way I have been doing it and has been successful for me.
That's so fascinating. I'm probably going to say that a lot during our chat. Neil deGrasse Tyson famously said something about what separates Homo sapiens from all the other critters on the planet is our ability to question why we're here. In other words, our
Mm.
ability to really think those more philosophical thoughts. And I'm wondering what your thought on that is, because if we're able to ask those questions of ourselves, of the universe at large, if that sets us apart from the other living beings on the planet, what role do you think mindset, in other words, your perspective, I
Mm.
guess, what role does that play in that questioning?
Yeah, so I view mindset almost as a filter, and of the infinite possibilities that there are, we get to consciously interact with a tiny subset of those. Whether it's the people that we choose to be friends with and build relationships with, the jobs that we see for ourselves, the um, industries, anything really, we get down selected into what we interact with, and become the little Lego set we can build our life from. And the thing that's going to turn infinite possibilities into the tools that the resources you actually have to build with is your filter. It's going to be your mindset. And we know a lot about how that is in neuroscience and things of before the age of 7, and beliefs and getting set, kind of in the operating system that you're running with. And so instead of trying to maximize what you can do with the tiny handful of Legos that you have, or trying to take Legos from somebody else who has a different handset of Legos than you do, or imitate what they're doing when you have totally different things at your control than they do. I work with people, and I have an understanding of how it works for myself to change the filter, and then sub-select, down select for yourself from infinite possibilities, the actual things that you do want to be building with, that you do want to be working with. And then to interact with that filter, it's an engineering design process. It's a reverse engineering process. Really, you start with, what do I want, having absolutely nothing to do with what do I already have and what do I believe is possible for me to have, and anything having to do with the resources around you or the resources you believe are accessible to you. You really just start on a blank sheet of paper and go through that design process, and that information comes from within, and there's a lot of tools that we can help people to do to source that information from inside of themselves instead of the world outside of themselves. And then once you know what it is that you want, you go about setting that into your new filter. And that's where you're doing the hard work that looks like sitting still with your eyes closed, or looks like going for a walk, looks like writing in your journal, but it is in fact really difficult, hard, the real work. And that's how you're changing your filter. And then the world around you appears to offer you different things. And it's like magic. And it's not at all magic.
Okay. You say it's like magic, but it's not at all magic. So what is it then?
It's think also of, if you could see an airplane, if you all you knew about gravity was it pulls things down, whether you want to say down to the center of the earth, however you want to say, the only experience you've ever had with gravity is falling down. And then somebody shows you an airplane or even a hang glider or even a balloon, anything that doesn't go down. And you'd say, well, how are you above gravity? How are you better than gravity? How have you broken gravity? And they say, well, I haven't broken gravity. I studied it so much. I understand the principles of it so well, the mechanisms of how it works in this physical reality that we live in. I understand it so well. I can in fact make an airplane made out of really heavy metal, a very heavy airplane, fly in the air. And by understanding that gravity so well. And so the same thing when you're living your life and hustling, working really hard, trying to prove worthiness, find value, provide service, based off of all these beliefs of how you understand yourself as a living being to interact with this three-dimensional reality. And somebody comes along and seemingly manifests something, so seemingly just becomes really successful, seemingly has a spontaneous remission of an illness, and you say, well, is that magic? How did you break the laws of health? How did you break the laws of the economy, break the laws of hard work and hustling? It's not fair. Maybe you're lucky. And they could come back just the same as the aerospace engineer would come back and say, no, I actually studied those laws so well. I understand them so well. I can move up and down within those laws. I can move left and right in those laws, where you think you're just stuck moving along the current. I understand the system so well, I can navigate any direction I want, regardless of where the wind and the current is going.
I'm taking a second. It sounds to me like what you're saying is know the rules before you break them, right? That's honestly what it sounds like. And I say this to my clients as well, just sort of that you have to know the concepts and the practices so well that you can play them like they're a musical instrument. Now, having said that, if you study these quantum, I'm going to call them laws. I'm not sure if if that is the right terminology, so well that you then know how to, I guess, work along with them or use them the way you need to use them. What keeps us as beings on the planet all from going, yeah, I'm just going to go study this so that I can, as you put it, manifest things and I can work with these laws to achieve the goals that I set for myself?
I would say it's being distracted or craving measurement. And that we are never ever breaking or able to break the laws of physics,
Mm-hmm.
or laws, right? Outside of government laws, but actual laws of science and reality, we can't break them. And in that way, it's uh we can trust them so much. This is part of what brings me to physics in the first place, or so in love with physics, is just how reliable it is, and how when you understand it, it's so repeatable.
Mm.
And so we're never able to break the laws of physics, and neither is anyone else. Um so and we don't understand all of them, and so we have these metrics that we check, like adjacent metrics, or related metrics that we can measure and check instead. Like we can measure, an electromagnetic force, but we can't measure, I don't know, say like a life force or something. So we have proximity things that we use instead of saying, if we want to quantify our health, we might have a whole bunch of things of blood pressure and heart rate and stuff that we use to indicate the state of health, because we can't directly measure the state of health, or life, or how much life we have left, which is really kind of probably what people are looking for in a lot of these health metrics. And same with business or finance or success. You can't measure happiness, you can't measure success. And so we have these adjacent things of money, and the flow of money, and a whole bunch of compounded metrics created off of things that are just adjacent to what we actually care about. And it creates this whole illusionary distraction, like a sandbox for people to go play in, with all of these metrics that are just representing kind of close to what you actually really want. And since there's so much hustle that's available in that world, people who have a belief of hustle will create me value. Hustle is what makes me valuable. My ability to work hard is what adds value to somewhere. They're drawn to that's simply an arena where they can show up and work hard and put in hours. And if your belief about how do you make money, how do you prove that you're worthy, do you need to prove that you're worthy, this is a whole arena for people with those beliefs to go off and live within those beliefs. And if you can shed those beliefs, if you can let go of them and see beyond them and realize that we've never been able to measure or predict or have any guarantee past the present moment of life, and you can live with that truth, you can then start living with things you can't measure and coming to peace with that and being able to take action in that, and not just either sit in that in awe and go live on a mountain top in robes and never interact with the world, or just be terrified of it and run away from it back into working really hard because at least you can measure things. If you can really learn to live in the flow, in the moment that way, knowing that you've never known anything anyways, it was all an illusion of a measurement, you just arrive at a freedom in how you're living, and you can create differently from that freedom.
I'm fascinated. One of the things that you said early on in the last couple of minutes was that you love physics, and that you know that it's repeatable, and that you can always rely on it. And it sparked in me something that I kind of went, huh. So I'm gonna go back to Neil deGrasse Tyson, actually, and it's because I recently rewatched Cosmos and also the new
Mm.
Cosmos, and one of the things that I remember seeing, as I'm a NASA nerd, I worked at NASA for many years, and one of the things that I remember seeing was some of the stuff that the original 1979 Cosmos kind of got wrong, and they got it wrong, and by the time we saw the new Cosmos, there were just a lot more things cleared up, because we had better technology, we had better systems as far as measurement and all of that. And I'm a firm believer that, if you get new information, that you are allowed to change your mind. And so I'm
Mm.
wondering, within this notion of don't try to quantify everything, just sit in the flow, there's something in here that makes me go, okay, but at the same time, we're constantly getting new information about all sorts of things we thought we knew inside and out. And then we go, oh, wait, we just discovered 41 new moons around this
Mm.
particular gas giant. We have better systems to measure. We have better instrumentation. And I've really, the thing that kind of gets me, Molly, is that there are so many things that we used to think were magic that now we go, no, they're
Mhm.
science. And I can't help but thinking that today's what would be considered magic may be tomorrow's science. We just don't yet have the instruments to measure it correctly. And so with that in mind, when you're talking about the power of thoughts to change your life, what do you think that people can do to harness that? To harness the
Mm.
ability to sort of see the information, stay in the flow, watch the new information come in, and then adapt to work in that same flow with it.
Yeah, and absolutely measure what we can and use everything that we understand to the extent that we understand it, but don't fall for it being the ultimate truth. Just like with Cosmos between the 70s and the recent one, so much more has been discovered, and the instrumentation, our ability to zoom in and see things and how we're thinking about things has changed, and also our understanding of things has changed, and it will again in another, whatever the next 20, 30, it will just continually always do that. And so that ability to be able to change your mind, to be able to um, realize, oh, that's a misunderstanding, or now we have a better understanding, and to drop the old one and pick up the new one is uh is a bit living out of the illusion of recognizing, okay, it's okay that we can measure things better. It's okay that I have acted with outdated information in the past when it was the best I had, and it's okay to do things differently, different things now based off of new information, and to be able to be in the moment and do that. Where people get really hung up is in the alternative to that is creating a narrative that's completely imaginary of like shame and judgment, where we look back on the past and we say, oh, how dare I not have known everything I know in 2024, in 1984, and
Mm.
have believed this then, or and either so ashamed of it or judgment of it, or so invested in having been right 40 years ago, that they're living 40 years ago justifying why I believe that I didn't have all of this, I had to do it this way. And so you're really just, instead of being able to be in the moment and move forward and accept the new information, people get stuck justifying why they only had the old information at the old time. And there's no fault to be had on that. It's a just a maturation process, or a letting go, like a self-care process almost, of acknowledging that that is all you knew. You did those things for a reason. You were good back then and you're good now. And even if you're doing totally different things, to allow people to let go of those things and move on and enjoy the new technology that is available to them, the new measurements, the new understanding that's available to us today.
I love that you said new technology and then right afterwards new understanding. I know technology can often give us new understanding once we use it to answer some of those questions. But one of the things that you've been talking about is that so much of this work is internal. In other words, we do it ourselves. And for me, meditation plays a huge role in my ability to envision and eventually manifest the things that I am sort of working on, if you will, in my life. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on the sort of similarities and differences between something that is something like, let's say, daydreaming or meditation, and actively working on manifesting a new reality. How do those three things shape your approach as a mindset engineer, and how do you help your clients and other people see the differences and the similarities between them, or among them, I should say?
Okay. Um, so the reason the work is internal is because the roadblock is internal, like those laws of physics, and whether you're thinking of gravity or electromagnetics, like what we're to classically understand is you classify as physics, or of these beliefs of I need to hustle to work hard to make money to be okay in the world, beliefs like that, which are not currently included in physics because our measurement doesn't extend to there. And science is just bounded by what we can measure. And as we can measure more, we can include more in science. So I understand I'm kind of pushing or, that boundary outside of what we have today. But since we know we're never breaking the laws of physics, when we aren't getting the results that we want in life, say financial results, relationship results, the kind of traditional categories that people would come to life coaching to work through, we're when we do get those, we do the work and change, and we're able to live the way we want to live, show up in life and get the results that we want to get. Nothing will have changed with the laws of physics. Nothing's going to stop antagonizing us that was antagonizing us before, and nothing's going to start working in our favor that wasn't showing up for us before. All of it's going to work exactly the same. What's going to change is our story in our head that is limiting us, that is down selecting for us the things that we're allowing ourselves to perceive and interact with. So that's the work has to be done on the inside, because nothing on the outside is going to change and nothing on the outside needs to change. And so you have kind of two phases to do on the inside. You have a design process, which could be done in like a journal, like with alertness and yeah, I think like alertness would be kind of the difference between journaling and say daydreaming or meditation, where you're picking things that you do want, and then you practice picking those things, and you practice associating those things with you through meditation or daydreaming or visualization, however you want to call it, which is the repetition process.
What do you mean by that? Which is the repetition process?
Mhm. So when you go to do the design process on a blank sheet of paper and say, I know in my whole life I've only ever experienced ABC, but I would like X, Y, and Z. So I would like something totally different outside of the bounds that I've ever experienced in my bank account, in my relationships, in my quality of life, whatever it is. And you do that design process, you're going to run into all the reasons you've never had it before, which are
Mm-hmm.
going to be stories in your head. It's going to be voices in your head that are going to tell you why you can't have that. So instead of either just believing them or acting accordingly to them, like kind of following their instructions, you can't have that because you need to work harder. And so you're like, okay, I'll believe you and I'll go work harder, kind of chasing after the laser pointer that they have you jump around after. Instead, if you intentionally provoke those stories by doing your design process and saying, I do want X, Y, and Z, and then you sit there aware of the mechanism, unaware of how the process is working and where the limitations are, and you sit there and you wait for that story to come up, and then you're like, aha, I got you, story. I lured you out with this goal. I lured you out with this fantasy, with this ambition that I have. And I lured you out by getting emotionally involved in like allowing my emotions to adopt this get interested in this new possibility for my life. And by doing that, you will attract the limiting story that's going to come out and try to get you to disjoin your emotions from that new state that you've connected them to. And if you do that, understanding, knowing that that's going to happen, and you're waiting to pounce on that story and capture it and start interrogating it instead of it telling you what to do and you going off and being completely distracted and completely letting go of the emotional state that you were trying to hold on to and going back and living your old life, essentially, you track that story instead, and then you interrogate it in your journal, going for a walk, going for a run, by just holding, like letting it tell you the story and taking no action, just breathing instead of taking all of the actions that you've taken your whole life. And let these stories hold up to the light and disprove them. So many of them we believe from such an early age that we have plenty of evidence in our life. We have plenty of ability to understand and see beyond them now as adults that we didn't have early in life. So many of them are things that we can easily correct the misunderstanding that came about and let it, and then it becomes easy to let it go. When we don't allow ourselves to look at it and we just say, well, this is just a rule I've obeyed my whole life and this rule has kept me safe. Like if you were told as a kid, maybe like, don't go in the kitchen, because if you go in the kitchen, there's knives and you could get cut and you could bleed to death and die. And now as an adult, you're like, I can't go in kitchens because I could bleed to death and die. And you hold that idea up and you understand, all the other steps that would have to happen, you could get over that and you could start allowing yourself to go in a kitchen or handle a knife. And these beliefs they're wrapped in a lot of things. There's a lot of protective layers on them. And so a journal is helpful to get past all the other distractions that are wrapped around them that over our lifetime we've put there to keep us from finding just the really nugget, the kernel on the inside. That as adults and as people who are wanting to change, we need to get all the way to that and then see it as a misunderstanding, see it as an incorrect, something we learned incorrectly about ourselves, and go back to that understanding of ourselves as the most advanced laboratory of consciousness and life that we're living in as a body, and the experts of consciousness and life that we're living in, that we are. And that gives us authority to override the beliefs that we were taught.
Okay, so I'm fascinated. This is so cool. So we have, as you put it, authority to override the beliefs that we were taught. The difference for me in listening to this is if they're beliefs about my self-worth, if they're beliefs about my internal sort of being deserving of being here, if they're beliefs about my internal abilities, I get that. Here's my question, though. When I was a kid, and one of the reasons I ended up working at NASA was because, oh, my stars, the second I saw Star Wars, I wanted to be an astronaut so badly. I have flat feet. I have terrible eyes. And I am friends with people who are astronauts and who've been astronauts. So I know the rigors of what you need to do to become an astronaut. And I was never going to be an astronaut, and I was never going to manifest the ability to be an astronaut. So I ended up working at NASA. Those are not things that I could manifest other than working at NASA and sort of knowing astronauts and maybe someday being able to get out of the Earth's orbit when the price comes down to something like, oh, you want to go up, above the atmosphere? Great. It'll be $40. And may I live long enough to see that. But that notion of it's not just my desire. It's not just my beliefs. There are lots of rules and laws physical and otherwise, that prohibit me from doing something like that. So when you're working with a client and they have a goal, it's not that it's not realistic on the inside. It's that it's, if someone's spine is broken, walking becomes, even if it's what they choose and want and work on, that becomes an impossibility until we get the technology to allow people with broken spines to walk, or until someone like me with terrible
Yeah.
eyesight and flat feet would be able to go up in space. How does that reconcile with this notion of our thoughts being able to manifest the things we most want and need?
Well, it's interesting you use the example of a broken spine. One of the people I learned from a lot is Joe Dispenza, and that is his story. That is literally, you know, his origin story is having a fractured spine,
Mm,
um, and refusing for that to be true for him. And in a short number of months, I think 8 or 9 months, began to walk again and lives a totally normal, mobile, athletic life. Um, and so I'm not saying that it's just a proof positive, I guess, of it's the 4 minute mile. And not that as soon as the 4 minute mile is broken, all of us can immediately go out and run, a sub 4 minute mile. But it
not me, not
does.
ever.
Right, right. I'm with you there. But it does reclass um everybody's ability. And what his and part of the reason I choose him as a teacher is because he can do that.
Hmm.
And so I would like to learn from the person who knows that's possible. And there are many, many people, medically or even in the alternative healing spaces,
Hmm.
that don't believe that that's possible
Hmm.
for a person. Or they're just like, there's limits, and the broken back is beyond the limit. Severed spinal cord is beyond the limit. A certain stage of cancer is beyond the limit, or whatever it is. And so their understanding, their ability to work, they have taken those infinite possibilities and filtered them down such that the spontaneous remission, such that healing the spine and walking again, such that changing bone structure and such isn't possible to them by their own design process, by their own initial belief, or by all of our own initial belief. And so to to know that it's possible, and then the work that Joe Dispenza, if anyone's not familiar with his work, the work he points people to do is meditation. It's almost entirely meditation. And it's in your understanding of who and what you are that is limiting us. And if we think that we are bodies, what is it in I don't know who to attribute the quote to, that the either consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain or nervous system, or the brain and nervous system and entire body are an epiphenomenon of consciousness. And those are totally mutually exclusive paradigms to be living in. And if you're living in the paradigm that consciousness is the epiphenomenon of the body, that your life comes out of the fact that you have a body, there is a certain bound of limits that are inherently placed on living through that paradigm. And if you live in the other paradigm, or an alternative paradigm, that your body comes out of the fact that you are conscious and you are alive, then there's literally a different set of rules that you're obeying within the unbreakable. Neither one of these paradigms are breaking the laws. We just give ourselves even more restrictive rules to live within under those laws. And it's a big shift to reconceive of yourself as life and as consciousness, and that your body and your house and your bank account and your business and your relationships and everything around you are emergent properties out of that, the information in your consciousness, the information of your life. And that is why I love quantum physics. That is what quantum physics says to me. Even the math, like the hard science of quantum physics, that is what it says to me. And then it brings the quantum computer is the consciousness, and it will display through its GUI, its user interface of your body, anything completely from scratch, based off of the state of that consciousness. And so it's a brand new skill to go learn to move that consciousness around. And I have a toddler nephew that I get to watch grow up, and I get to watch him learn to use his motor skills, and how operated it is, and how time consuming, and how many iterations it takes him of, moving his body around until he's mastered being able to move his body around. And then when I sit in meditation and I try to move my consciousness around, and I just imagine this whatever version of, however you can visualize a consciousness, just doing the ridiculous motions of a infant or toddler like this, how clumsy I am at being able to move my consciousness around, because in 37 years, I never practiced it until a couple of years ago. And that's that repetition that's required. Just to learn to use the muscle, use the skill, use the sensing organs other than the 5 physical senses. It takes a while to develop those. It took a while to develop the ones that we're already really good with.
What are the sensing organs that aren't the ones, the 5, like, I guess, taste, touch, hearing, smell, sight? What are the sensing organs outside of those?
I'd say at the very least, the heart, and being like a set, like an interoception sense of like an inside of a, whether it's an emotional state, or I certainly do not have I'm not a biologist, I don't, or a psychologist. I don't have the right language for this, and perhaps there's nothing established to have discourse within at this point, other than the work of Joe Dispenza. But our 5 physical senses tell us a lot of information about the outside world around us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of information about who we are, not like the state of our organs or the health, the state of the inside of our body, but who we are and what we desire. Think of, like, if you could see as clearly your life's purpose and your passion and your desire in life as clearly as you can sense things on the outside of you. And it's difficult for a lot of people to know that. It takes a lot of time to practice asking those questions and looking for, then allowing yourself to go into the daydreaming, allowing your mind to become empty so that there's space for a new thought to project itself in your mind. And so at the very least, I would say the heart is sensing something that we're not attributing to the outside world.
It brings to mind, in listening to you, Richard Bach's book, Illusions, and the moment when he's talking to Shimoda and he goes, "There's no way that I'm going to be able to walk through this wall." And his guru, we'll call him, says, well, yeah, that's because consciously you know that there's a wall there, and your conscious mind and your subconscious mind at this point are going, there's a wall there. I cannot walk through this wall. And so therefore, you're not going to be able to walk through the wall. And so
Mhm.
he has Richard do a meditation, and he wants Richard to think of, uh, it's been a while since I've read the book, but he wants Richard to think of things not being as solid as he imagines, and to instead think about all of the space between all of the atoms and electrons and all of that. And what ends up happening is Richard wakes up for the meditation, and he's sort of half in, half out of the earth, out of the soil. He's sort of buried himself a little bit, didn't realize he was doing it. And it's because he got out of his own way. And so I guess
Mm.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that notion of what steps can someone take? You're mentioning journaling, you're mentioning meditation. If someone wants to if someone wants to start on this journey, what what fundamental message or lesson do you hope that someone who's listening to this about the power of this mindset shift
Mm.
will take away from having listened to this?
So as a skill to practice outside of, I practice Joe Dispenza's meditations, and I would, anybody who's interested in not just learning like this academically or intellectually, but experiencing it, letting your body be like, to sense things and experience things through your body, I would just say go to his website and just start following his meditations. Read his books if you're interested in it, but I know a lot of people who've read his books, and his books all point you to meditations, and they still just read the book. It's that was so amazing. It's so inspiring. I also love it when he's on podcasts, but they don't go and follow. He points you directly to do the work, experience it yourself, connect yourself, plug yourself into a new thing to sense. So I would read the books if you want to, but first and foremost, try and practice and do the meditations. And along parallel with that, I think there's a thought path to take to reconceive of who you are and what reality is. And to do that, like, rhetorical questions are your friend, your path. Start answering rhetorical questions, or don't assume anything is rhetorical. Like, if kind of, in physics, we zoom in and look and realize, well, hey, there's not much inside the atom at all, and until we realize, hey, actually there's nothing. There's no substance inside the atom, there's no substance inside matter. And so the question that comes up is like, well, how can if there's no substance in matter, like, why am I not falling through the floor? I can't walk through walls. So how is there no substance in matter? And people bounce right off that question and stay in the Newtonian world, stay completely outside of exploring what does this mean. Then an immediate next question that I think is really interesting for anybody to go think about it, and is kind of the story you just told. Well, if there is nothing in atoms, there's no substance in them. And it is also true in my experience that I cannot walk through walls. And instead of saying, okay, the reason for that is there's substance in atoms, say, now I need to know a new reason. I need to think through until I have a new reason. Why can I, made out of atoms that turns out there's no substance in whatsoever, not pass right through a wall that's made out of atoms and turns out there's no substance in them whatsoever? And then, after I'll just take like this huge leap that represents having put my shoes on and tied them, laced them up, and run probably hundreds of miles at this point in the
Hmm.
last 20 years thinking about stuff like this. Why can't you? It's because of consciousness. I like the story you told. I'm conscious that there's a wall there. I've decided, as a conscious being with authority over where substance appears to be, that's what consciousness is. Or part of what consciousness is. It's something that has authority over where substance appears to be, where substance shows up, and where substance acts solid. that's one of the things that consciousness is doing all of the time. And that's who I am. And I believe there's a wall there. So, and I believe there's a body where my body is, and I can sit down and I can hold those beliefs up to the light and I can continue to reason through them. I say sit down. I've never been able to do that sitting still. That's where the lacing up the shoes and running comes from. But however it is that works for you, to just keep pulling on the thread and just tenaciously answer the rhetorical questions and and insist on coherence in your new model. Like if you start from the starting point, there's no substance in matter, and build a model of reality that includes my seemingly substantial body and my seemingly substantial house. There's a lot of rigor to go in to connect those 2 points, in understanding where does substance come from, and what is consciousness, is what is my authority to create and change it. And it's a really fun journey.
I love that you said that it's fun, because frankly, the thing that and I am a meditator, a longtime meditator, a longtime yoga practitioner. For me, it's not motion like walking always. It's singing that puts me into that space, sort of vocalizing. But I'm going to just be very honest with you. There is, like in the book, Richard in Illusions, Richard freaked out. He freaked out. What do you mean I put myself half in, half out of the soil? There's no way that should have been possible, and he was very afraid. And this notion of change, this kind of overwhelming quantum level, there's no there in matter change, is probably going to make people at least somewhat afraid. So I guess I'm wondering what you do. Like, your client comes to you and says, I'm working on this and it has me really freaked out. What do you do to help your clients sort of facilitate those transitions to make them more smooth?
Yeah, and that is exactly why the work to me comes into one-on-one coaching, because it's not information you can't learn from a book. It's actually written in books all over the place. And it is a really big shift. It is really scary. If you're doing it right, it is shocking and possibly terrifying. And it's to be there with people, the same as it's to be there with people, and it's to be a little farther along the way than people. Like, an analogy I like to use is, if a child comes to me and they believe there's a monster in their closet, they've heard a noise and they're determined it's a monster in their closet and they're terrified, and I can help them go to that closet and I can fearlessly open the door and show them there's no monster there. If I have a larger set of experience than they have to know we're not going to find the monster there that they're describing. If they come to me and they say, this is terrifying, reality is going to fall apart, everything's going to fall apart, there will be no order, whatever the fear is, if I believed that fear, I wouldn't be able to take them by the hand and go back and open the closet and just dispel the myth, with their senses, with all of their senses, not just, this is where, the heart and the non-physical senses, or interoception senses, come at play too, is that all the senses get involved and they experience for themselves what is beyond. And so if we take the next step up beyond, we've trusted the reliability of substance. We've trusted the structure of substance. And what we really want is something to trust instead. If all of that's going to fall away, if all of the order in our world, if all of the progress in our world, all of the structure and relationship in the world that we have is based off of matter, we need something else to trust. And I don't find it in science. That's where you kind of opened this up with saying it like popped out the other side, like gone all the way through. I don't find that in science. I certainly did not find it in religion either, but possibly understanding or using the term of like spirituality outside of religion. And to me, spirituality is what we will one day find to be scientific, but our instruments can't measure it right now.
Mhm.
And then it's to, as scientists, acknowledge there are and must be things beyond the scope of our measurements today. Or we wouldn't be telling children, go study science. We'd say, we've got it all. You guys can all go finger paint. Like, you know, like we want people to continue understanding or, studying science, because we know there's things that the future generations will discover that our scientists don't know. So as a scientist, to know that there are things that aren't measurable, that are real, that are part of the laws of physics. And to me, that's what spirituality is,
Mm.
as opposed to like religion, is to include, to allow myself to trust those things, because I, as a conscious life having human being, experience them, and I can sense them, and I can practice in meditation sensing them so well that it becomes easier and easier to trust them. And then once you can trust them, they're your tools, you can build with them, the same as I can build with physical bricks, because I trust them as much as I trust the physical bricks.
Which aren't actually made of anything at all because there's nothing to matter.
Right.
Oh boy.
Right, exactly. So at the same time, you start trusting what you used to trust less and less, but it needs to go somewhere. If the floor just drops out from under you, literally, if you think the floor is just dropping out from under you and there's nothing to catch you, that is terrifying. And there's no hope, and there's no point in jumping out of your paradigm. At that point, you'd be like, well, it's much better to just, I'm actually more productive. It's more enjoyable to live life and just believe that matter is substantial. And if you don't have anything to trust instead, if you're unwilling to allow yourself to experience the goodness that is beyond the measurements of scientific instrumentation today, there is no point in you changing your paradigm. And even just beginning the process. Because the end of the process is being willing to experience things that science today cannot explain. And I really think that any true scientist should be thrilled to do that, because we should always know that it's growing, that we will never know all of it. So I think any true scientist should be willing and excited to do that.
I mean, to me, it's interesting that you said that because I go back to Neil deGrasse Tyson and his talk about what a two-dimensional being would experience three-dimensional space like, right? So a two-dimensional
Mhm.
being is going to be flat. And if a three-dimensional object were to pass through two-dimensional space, it would start out looking like, let's say it's a sphere, it would start out looking like a dot. The dot
Mhm.
would get bigger into a circle. The circle would get bigger, bigger, bigger. And eventually it would start getting smaller, smaller, smaller until it became a dot and it would disappear. That would be a two-dimensional being's experience of a three-dimensional object. And then he said, and here's the thing that keeps me up at night. What keeps scientists up at night is those unexplained phenomena. What if they are, say, a ninth dimensional object
Mhm.
passing through
Mhm.
three-dimensional space, and we just can't
Mhm.
measure it yet? So your point
Mhm.
is very well made, and I'm very interested in how this is it a new branch of I guess quantum physics is what you're calling it, but when you're describing it to a layperson, what is it that you say to talk about this? Like in one sentence, what is it that you're talking about?
Um, what we're I'm really talking about transformation. And people really don't have to know anything about science to do it. You're going
Mm.
to take actions, and your actions, in order to do this, your actions are going to be things like meditating, like like going out and hunting and picking up all your rhetorical questions and answering them, demanding coherence from your answers in a new, so that you're not just dismissing your own rhetorical questions like we dismiss child questions, actually putting together a new paradigm for them to answer them in. But that's all in your imagination. It doesn't really take a scientific understanding at all, and much of it is beyond that fence of where our scientific instruments can even measure. So what people are wanting is either transformation in the results that they're getting in life, or they're wanting to get the results that they're getting in life in an easier way. They've gotten exactly what they wanted, and it's taking a lot of hard work to maintain it. And they want it to be easier. And you need a new paradigm to be easier in. So the science is only, I came to this through science. And so I'm able to meet people who are stuck in believing that the world ends at the boundaries of our instrumentation, and help them get over that belief so that they can live in a world that's more expansive than that. I think science for many people has become tremendously limiting. It is cutting them off from that spirituality. It's cutting them off from trusting things that are unmeasurable. And that's painful. It's painful to be a bigger, capable being stuck in such a tiny little box. And people experience that pain in a whole number of different ways.
Well, this is fascinating. Wow. This is really, yeah, I could keep you here all day. This is so cool. There's a lot, I mean, there's a lot to this, and you've already mentioned the meditations for Joe Dispenza. Is that how you say his name?
Yes, Dispenza. I have no affiliation whatsoever. I just love his, I just I think he's got a lot of answers.
It sounds like he's certainly onto something. Yeah, I'm very excited to take a look at it myself. I've never, my meditation is almost never looking at the quantum physics of it all, so I'm very interested to see what that is like. But we're talking about you, Molly, and your and if somebody wants to know more about you and know more about your coaching practice, what are the best ways for someone to find you?
Yeah, on my website, mindset-engineering.com, you can reach out to me straight through there. And I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my only social right now. And I'm just the mindset engineer. You can look me up at Molly Brown, but I think there's many, many, many Molly Browns in the world, and there is just one mindset engineer. So that's an easier handle to find me through.
I love it. Yeah. And I remember the first time I met you and I saw that as your handle in a group that we both belong to. And I was like, this is awesome. I love it. All right, cool. So if you're listening to this, I will be putting those links in the show notes so that you can find Molly very quickly. But Molly, I'm really grateful that you took the time. This is super fun. I love conversations like this that really get me thinking. And you did. This is awesome. I have just two more questions before I let you go get on with your day. And these two questions are questions that I ask everybody who comes on the show. And the first question is, what is it that gets you up in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
I haven't used an alarm for a number of years. I I'm excited for my days. I usually am studying something. Right now, I'm super interested in water. And at the end of the night, I have to put down a book and stop reading it and go to bed. And then I'm excited in the morning to get back to it and keep running my little experiments, seeing how my little experiments that were cooking overnight came out. And I'm just excited to keep on um, getting answers to my questions.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. That's cool. And then the last question is one that is a little silly, but I find that yields some really profound answers. And the question is this: If you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
You've got this.
I love it. Super easy and succinct. That's terrific. All right, cool. That's great. That's great. I love it. Molly, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. This was super cool conversation. And I had like 20, let me look, 23 questions that we didn't even get to half of them. So one of these days I'll invite you back and hopefully you'll be free enough to come and we'll talk more about this because this is very interesting to me. I think it's fascinating. Thank you once again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You have been listening to the Creative Solutions Podcast with me, Isolde Trachtenberg, and with my guest this week, mindset engineer Molly Brown. And you know how to find her. You know you should because, wow, super cool work that she's doing. And you can click on the various links in the show notes to find her and all about what really cool stuff. And now I'm curious about, she said projects. I'm like, what projects is she working on? What experiments does she have going on overnight? And it could be in the dream state. It could be in the meditative state. Maybe next time she comes, we will hear more about it. Until that next time, and until the next time you hear from me, I'm Isolde Trachtenberg for the Creative Solutions Podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the show if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2024. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.